It's time for the All Aussie Rules Football Podcast. Today we're checking out all the results of the Match Sim games. Hope you enjoy. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Welcome on in, everybody, to the All Aussie Rules Football Podcast. This is episode 8 of 2025, and today we're going to be looking at a wrap-up of every Match Sim that we've had so far. There's been 9, I guess, technical Match Sim matches. We're not looking at the intra-club ones so much. We're just going to look at all the ones of teams versus teams. So we're going to run through them today from start to finish. Basically, that is everything that is planned for this episode. I've watched them all, so you don't have to watch them all, basically. We're going to jump into them very shortly. As always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We're chugging along. It's new season, new same podcast, but hopefully better this year. We're up to the 2 episodes a week. We've got through all the pre-season, which was 1 episode a week, and now, as we get really close, at time of recording, we're 11 days from the start of the season. By the time you see this, it will be less than that. So we're getting very close to the start of opening round and 2025 officially kicking off. So now we're 2 episodes a week. They'll be coming to you every Monday and Thursday mornings. So make sure you come back, check them out. They're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube as well. Also, make sure you check out the YouTube channel. We've got plenty of content over there. We've got season previews for every club going live. We're doing 3 to 4 a week. We're almost all the way through the clubs. I think we've got 5 to go. So, we're nearly there. My plan is probably to have them all out by Sunday morning next week. So, a week from now, basically. Hopefully, every team will be live on the channel. So, make sure you go check them out. Your team as well as the others. There's plenty of good content over there. But without any further ado, let's jump into the Match Sim wrap-up. We will start, obviously, where it started. First game of the Match Sim week, or week and a bit that it's been, was Essendon Bulldogs. It was all the way back last Saturday, so this is over a week ago now. Interesting game, I guess, in some ways. We'll start with the scores. The Bombers kind of did really well, especially after quarter time. They kicked 11-11-77 to 8-10-58 to win by 19 points. Pretty solid performance from them. They were down by a couple goals in that first quarter, but after that, it was kind of one-way traffic. Major goal kickers, I think the main story here is Tom Edwards from the Bombers, who wasn't even on the Bombers list. He was just training along with them. He kicked 4. All in the second half. Didn't play in the first half. Came on in the second half. Kicked 4 goals. Really good performance from him. And as a result of that, has been signed by the Bombers as an SSP player. So potentially a spot in the lineup for him as well. In all honesty, I wouldn't expect him to go out and kick multiple goals every week. But the loss of Stringer obviously opens up a spot in that forward line. So you never know. The Bombers clearly were the better team in this one on the day. Whether they put more into it, maybe they tried harder, who knows. But they certainly looked pretty decent in this game. They played Brian as their main ruckman, with Draper starting in the forward line and being that second ruckman, I guess. Whether that's just to give them both time, which it probably is at this stage. But also, it kind of worked well. Draper kicked 2 goals while sitting forward. Brian certainly looked pretty good in the ruck. The Bulldogs were playing Tim English as a second ruck, didn't give him as much time. They had Crosley as the main ruck, so he won't be continuing on too much, I wouldn't imagine. So, they kind of weren't doing as much in that regard. The Bombers' forward line worked pretty well. They got 4 goals, as I said, from Edwards, 2 from Archie Perkins, which were back-to-back goals in the second or third quarter. I can't even remember. Second quarter, I think. Kako kicked a goal. He was good. Draper kicked 2, as I said, including 1 from the boundary. Overall, Bombers looked good. Merritt looked good in these 3 quarters he played. Redmond was good early. Shield has been well publicised. Coming off the halfback flank, did all right with it. Was part of a couple good chains that moved the ball forward. Dersma was good. Martin struggled a little bit in terms of ball use, I think, but I mean, we know that he's an absolute star, so I wouldn't be too concerned about that. Elijah had 32 touches and the most centre bounce attendances for the Bombers, so he had a good game. For the Doggies, Sanders looked pretty solid. He had 28 touches, I think, something similar to that. He was good. Obviously, he could get a really good chance to get some early games and some good midfield time based on the fact that Treloar is injured for the first part of the season. So there's an opportunity there for him. I don't think you take too much out of this if you're a Bulldogs fan. It's a bit of fitness, a bit of match sim practice, but overall I don't think it's a huge indication of what the Dogs will be this year in 2025. The game against Hawthorn will probably, I would imagine, be a lot different to that. They'll get a few players back, I would imagine, and we'll see how that goes. Ed Richards looked good in the first half. Darcy was okay early, but didn't trouble too much. Possibility of a young player that's got, well, I mean, he was a older draftee, but Davidson was solid. He could be a possibility, Sam Davidson, for some early games this season. He's a mature age player, and he certainly looked ready for senior football in what we saw from him. So there's a possibility that we'll see him. Worth noting some players that didn't play in this game. So for the Doggies, Treloar is obviously injured and will be missing the start of the year. Bont, Libba, Bailey Dale, Liam Jones, Johannesson. Obviously, Jamara Ugle-Hagan has only just returned to training for the Bulldogs, and Nick Caulfield. Whereas for the Bombers, it was Darcy Parish, Ben Mackay, Jordan Ridley, Sam Durham, Jade Gresham, Matt Guelphy, who's injured, Nick Cox, Laverde, and Todd Goldstein didn't play as well. As I mentioned, they did go with the 2 rucks, with Nick Bryan doing the majority of it, but overall, a good hit out for the Bombers. Yeah, I don't know what else to say about it. Really, it was, Bombers look good, Dogs not so much, but I mean, they're missing most of their best players, whereas the Bombers did have Merritt, they did have Martin, they did have Shield, Draper. So across the board, I think the Dons probably were more ready for this than the Bulldogs. Game number 2 wasn't really... I mean, it was a game still. It was better TV quality than the rest of the match sim games. Some of them were tough to watch, let's be fair. But this was the Fremantle v Indigenous All-Stars, and it was a good game. It was entertaining, that's for sure, but it was a bit of a flogging in the end. The Indigenous All-Stars were 2 goals up at half-time and ended up kicking away with a 9-goal-to-4 second half. They kicked 16-12, 108 to Fremantle 9-11-65. They were just too fast. They were too keen. Everything just went the way of the Indigenous All-Stars. But, I mean, let's be honest. They had a lot more to play for here than Fremantle. Fremantle were at that phase, like a lot of teams in Match Sim. Not too concerned with the result, just about getting game time into players. So that's where Fremantle were, whereas Indigenous All-Stars, obviously, they wanted to win. And boy, oh boy, did they win. They were great. I think clearly best player was Jai Simpkin. He had 30 touches, 10 clearances and a goal. Outstanding performance from him. Bobby Hill kicked 4 goals. Could have had 6 probably, in all honesty, but a really good performance from him. Warren Francis looked outstanding on the forward flank / midfield. Probably a bit more forward flank time than midfield, but still was great. Had about 17 or 20 touches or something, kicked 3 goals. And then pretty much everyone just in that forward line all contributed. The midfield was great. The defence was great. Everybody from the Indigenous All-Stars came to play and they had a good performance. For Fremantle, as I said, I wouldn't take too much from it. They had some good players. Frederick kicked 3, Sharp 2, Jackson 2, a miss 2. They're more so just getting ready for a season. Sarong had plenty of it, looked good. The one downside for Fremantle here was Switovski went off with concussion, so he'll be in concussion protocols for the next week or two. Should still be fine for their first game, but he did miss, I think, 3 games last year with concussion, so slight concern, but I would still expect that he'll be back for round 1. What else do we take from this? I mean, obviously, Fremantle's coach made the comments after the game, we're not going to show the rest of the AFL what we're planning this year. I think that was a bit of a crock of an excuse, but in the end, showing strategy isn't the concern, I don't think. It's just the fact that they didn't have as much to play for in this. Players are all about getting miles into their legs at this stage of the season, and as you've seen throughout the whole week and a half so far, teams are not concerned about wins and losses right now. They mean nothing. It's just about trying to play the best personally that you can to prepare yourself for a good season. So I think that's about all I have to say from this game. It was entertaining. A lot of really good players out there, and they certainly entertained. We'll move on to game number 3 of the weekend. This was the Tigers going over to the West and playing West Coast. Interesting game time, this one. It was at like 9:30 a.m. WA time. On a Monday morning. It was they only played 3 quarters as well, and the first quarter was a tough watch, if we're being honest. I think it was 1 goal to 1 goal, 6-7 in favour of Richmond at quarter time, and it was not really quarter time because they only played 3 periods, but you know what I mean. And I was like, this is a tough watch. But after that first period, the second period was all West Coast. They looked absolutely outstanding in that second period. They kicked 6 goals to 0 and just really controlled the match. Looked quite outstanding. Final quarter, they looked good again. Richmond did finally start to kick a couple late, but the damage was well and truly done. So after 3 periods, it was 10 goals, 262 for the Eagles to 4-2-26 for the Tigers. So a comfortable win, some accurate kicking from the Eagles here, which was good to see. Notable absentees from both teams. Both teams had quite a lot of players out here. So we West Coast were without Waterman, Harley Reid, Cripps, McGovern, then Luke Ryan and Tim Kelly, who were both playing in the Indigenous All-Stars team. Campbell Chesser, Ryan Marich and Tom Gross. So most of them are pretty big names. Like you look at Waterman, Reid, Cripps, McGovern, Ryan, Kelly, all definite best 22 players. Meanwhile, for Richmond, they were missing some good players as well. Floston, Hopper, Taranto, Short, Lynch, Nankervis, Nathan Broad, all definite best 22 players. Josh Smillie, who's obviously going to miss the start of the season. Jonty Fall and Maurice Rioli, who was in the All-Stars game. So both teams had plenty of players out. But there was still plenty of good talent out there to watch and learn a bit. West Coast, their forward line looked pretty good. Their ball movement overall looked pretty good. Take from it what you can. I mean, Richmond were playing a pretty young team out there, missing a lot of good players. But West Coast looked good. Brockman kicked 3. He was really good up forward. Allen kicked 2. That's Oscar Allen for the West Coast. kicked 2. Hewitt, Long, Petroselli, Duar, and Uis kicked his first in West Coast colours. Obviously, Carlton player. And then for Richmond, Lawler kicked 2. Potentially would have had a shot at 3. We'll get to him in a minute. Hayes, Brown kicked 1, and Mansell kicked their other. A couple injuries. First one looked like Hugo Ralphsmith grabbed his hammy in that second period and went off. We didn't see him again. I would say he is unlikely to be seen for the start of the season, because I haven't actually followed up on this, but I would assume he did his hammy. It certainly looked like it. And the other one was number 1 pick Sam Lawler, who had a really good game in all honesty. Had about 15 odd touches, kicked 2 goals. As I said, would have been lining up for 3 because he got a free kick for high contact. But that contact did break his jaw, so he was pushed into a contest, broke his jaw. So he's potentially going to miss some football. He's certainly going to miss some pre-season action. He won't be playing in their other pre-season game. But hopefully it won't delay his start too much. Hopefully, potentially still could play game 1. We'll see. But he certainly looked ready to play AFL football. I know there's a lot of senior players for both teams not in this game, but he did look a handy type. He was winning the ball. He was getting forward well, so he certainly will be in Richmond's best 22. There's no doubt. When he's fit, he will be out there regularly for the Tigers this year. I don't think we have too high hopes for either of these teams, but West Coast certainly looked all right with a lot of people out. So take from that what you will. Moving on to the next game, it's Geelong Hawthorn. This was also on the same day. It was on a Monday last week, so a week ago basically. First look at Bailey Smith in Geelong colours. And yeah, a few others interesting things from the game that we looked out for, but this was probably, in my opinion, the most enjoyable game from the match sims to watch. It ended up with Geelong 15-16, 106 to Hawthorn 13-8, 86. Some poor kicking from Geelong, certainly in that first half. They were 6 goals 13 at half time. They corrected it a bit in the second half, kicking 9-3. But their inaccuracy certainly cost them a chance to blow Hawthorn out in this. Not that it really matters either way, but yeah, good performance from both teams. It was entertaining. The Hawthorn midfield certainly looked really good. Geelong were playing a lot of their midfielders not in the centre the whole time, so there's that. But Hawthorn's midfield certainly looked like it was raring and going. So that was a positive for them. Both teams played fairly strong teams. Like Geelong were only missing Conway, Manor, Cam Guthrie, Humphreys, Stengel and Jack Martin. Hawthorn was missing Nick Watson, Barras, D'Ambrosio, Luke Bruce, CJ, Jarman Impey and Carl Amon. So basically full strength teams with a couple people missing, like obviously Watson, Barras, D'Ambrosio certainly are all in their best team. Same with Geelong, Stengel, Cam Guthrie certainly in their best 22. So a few players missing, but overall fairly strong teams for both teams. The Geelong forward line looked good. Ollie Henry kicked 4, including one snap from the boundary, which was outstanding. They look like they're going to be strong again this year. No reason to believe they won't be. They've pretty much only got stronger from last year, where they finished top 4 and missed out in a prelim final by 10 points or whatever it was. So they look good. Close kicked 3, Cameron kicked 2, Neil kicked 2, which is huge if he's kicking goals up there for them. Gives them that third tall option forward. O'Sullivan, Holmes, Myers and Wiltshire all kicked 1. For Hawthorn, it was McGuinness with 2, Day 2, Shoal 2, then Gunston, Newcomb, Weddle, Morrison, Reeves, Ramsden and Hardwick all with 1. Hardwick's an interesting one. Obviously, last year pre-season played forward, and then once the season came around, he played back most of the year. Played a couple games forward and actually contributed quite well up forward, but then they swung him back again. Gave him a bit of forward time again this pre-season. Will they keep him forward? I guess we'll see. They've got an interesting lineup and squad depth, certainly in that defence line, so maybe they are looking at moving him forward this year. We'll see how that plays out, but it was a good game, good hit out for both teams overall. Bailey Smith looked good in the new colours, there's no doubt about that. Injuries from this one. Scrimshaw got a poke in the eye, but he should be fine. Battle went off with a corky, also should be fine. And then obviously there's a few players that didn't play that were due to some injuries. Worth noting, Jack Martin did play in the VFL intra-club game, so I reckon potentially see him in the next one if he's actually in line for a spot in the team. I'm not 100% sure. I don't think he's in their best 22. But we'll see how that plays out. Other than that, I don't know if there's too much else to say about it. It was a good game. It was, as I said, the one I enjoyed the most from the week of practice games was this one. Yeah, so that's all I've got to say about that. We'll move on to the next one, which was the Battle Royale. It was a three-way matchup. It was one of the more interesting games, or setups for games, I guess. It was Brisbane, Gold Coast and Collingwood playing up at People First Stadium. All three teams played a full game, basically, each. It started with Collingwood-Brisbane, then it was Brisbane-Gold Coast, and then it was Gold Coast-Collingwood. We'll split them into three to start with, and then we'll do a quick synopsis of each team at the end. So we started with Brisbane-Collingwood, as I said. Brisbane got out of the blocks, looked really good from the start. They kicked 5-9-39 to 4-2-26. Gallup kicked 2 goals. He looked good. Looked like he's potentially going to be pushing for a spot in this lineup. He did make a couple mistakes, giving away free kicks and stuff throughout his time on the field, but overall he looked really good. Rayner looked good. Lockie Neal was outstanding. He was Brisbane's best in this first game. And then for Collingwood, Nick Dacos was everywhere. He had a ton of it. He looked really good. Down back, they had... sorry, I'm having a mental blank. I know his name. You know his name. Oh, mental blank has really hit me hard here. I just even saw his name. Reef McGuinness. Jeez. Sorry about that pause. Moving on. Reef McGuinness went back. Obviously has played key forward in the AFL so far. So they've swung him back. He looked alright. Jacob Ryan looked really good for Collingwood in that back line. I think we'll see him get quite a few games this year based on what we saw in this one. But overall, Brisbane kind of looked really good. They kicked 3-0 in that first quarter. Collingwood came back a little bit late, but ended up 39-26. Comfortable winners for Brisbane. Collingwood left the field. Gold Coast joined the field. Brisbane continued on. Brisbane kept mainly most of their senior AFL listed players out there for this one as well. Some players did go off, but overall, I think they were planning originally to play a seconds team in this one. But they kept it pretty similar. Didn't really lose anyone. A few players didn't play full all the way through, but Gold Coast had their full team in for this one, and it was a good match. Gold Coast ended up winning at 7-5-47 to Brisbane 6-1-37. Jed Walter kicked 2, Ainsworth, Goulburn, Humphrey, Rogers and Mac Andrew kicked a ripper from outside 50. And then for Brisbane, Rayner kicked 2, so he got 3 across the 2. Beckett, Bailey, Marshall, and Gallup also got one. Another one here, so he ended up with 3 as well across the 2. A bit of fire in this one. There was a bit of pushing and shoving. Gold Coast went after Ashcroft a little bit. A little bit of push and shove. Nothing too serious, but just a little bit of Q clash shenanigans. It was a good game. And then worth noting that Leo Lombard was went off with a sore right shoulder. Looked like a dislocated shoulder. Obviously, he was a high draft pick for them. I don't know how serious it is. I haven't heard anything yet. But I would imagine it won't be too serious. I would imagine we'll still see him back reasonably early in the season. He showed a little bit of class in the little bit that we did see of him. The final game was Gold Coast Collingwood, and Gold Coast looked good again. They won this one 8-2-50 to Collingwood 5-2-32. So Gold Coast won 2 of their 3. Both of their matchups, sorry. Brisbane won 1 of their 2, and Collingwood did not win any. Goal kickers in this one were Reid, Swallow, Moyle all kicked 2. Jed Walter kicked another 1. King kicked 1. Collingwood, who had a whole new 22 for this half, had West kick 2, Bennett, Mychek and McQuarrie all kick 1. Gold Coast kind of just controlled this one the whole way out. They kicked 6 goals to 3 in the first half, or the first period, and then 2 goals to 2 in the second. Let's, I guess, talk about each team and what they bought for the day. So Brisbane, first of all, ended up playing a lot more of their senior team across both periods than I think most people expected. It was kind of publicised that Brisbane were going to play mainly AFL in the first game against Collingwood and then do their reserves / VFL in the second. It ended up being mainly their seniors the whole way through. Only players that didn't make an appearance: Darcy Gardner, McCarthy, Duday, Kitty Coleman, who the coaches said should be back around round 4 or 5, I think. Hipwood didn't play, Fort and Starchevich. So pretty solid senior team. Both Ashcrofts for Brisbane look good. I think they take only positives from this. They're going to be a strong team again this year, there's no doubt. They got through last year with a lot of injuries, so it's only to be expected that they'll be even better, in all honesty, this year. Next up, we'll go Gold Coast as the home team. Once again, they pretty much played both their matches with their senior team on the most part. Players that didn't play: Daniel Rioli, Sam Flanders, Ballard, Miller, Davies and Lemons. They look good. They won both their matchups. I mean, it's pre-season. You can't read too much into the results, but they look pretty good. Their ball movement was fast. Like we kind of expect. It's what they did last year at home. Was fast ball movement, getting over the back and just running teams off their feet, I guess. And that's kind of what they did in both of their matchups here. So, positive signs for them for sure. And then Collingwood, they having the split match, having a match, then having an hour off and then having another one, had a completely different strategy than the other two teams. They went with 122 and then completely changed it to a whole new 22 for the second part. So their first one was most of their AFL best 22, I guess, like probably 10 to 12 of them with a couple young players, and then like 3 or 4 VFL listed players in there as well. And then their second 22 had a sprinkling of their senior players like Quaynor, Maynard, Pendlebury, Sidebottom, mixed in with some younger players, as well as about 7 VFL listed players. So completely different strategy from Collingwood to the rest. We'll see how that plays out for them. It concerns me a little bit when last year they were really slow starters to the AFL season, and they're probably the team that's put the least amount of game time into some of their senior players, but in the end it's the way they've gone, and maybe that's fine. I'm not an expert in that regard. So players that they had missing from both were DeGoey, Tom Mitchell, Demarcia, Mason Cox, Harvey Harrison, who's injured, and then Bobby Hill and Ash Johnson, who both played for the Indigenous All-Stars game last week. So that's basically how that match, the three-way match, the Battle Royale went. Gold Coast, outstanding. Brisbane looked really good. Collingwood, it's pre-season. Don't read too much into it. But they had some highlights, like Nick Dacos in that first game. He is firing and ready to go for season 2025. Don't you worry about that. Next game was Sydney GWS. I think this one was on Friday from memory. And this was an interesting game. Started in the dry. Ended up raining quite a bit. Absolutely poured down. But Sydney looked so good in this, in all honesty. They ended up winning it 19-11, 125 to GWS 10-8, 68. So a comfortable smacking. And Sydney looked good. All their players are ready to go. So Amati kicked 6. He looked really good from the start. I know he did show signs of this last year. He did kick the 9 against Adelaide, and other than that, had a lot of very quiet games. It's only pre-season, but he kicked 6, so he did everything he can in this game. Braden Campbell kicked 4. He looked outstanding. He's looking like he's going to be pushing into this team this year. A lot of individual goal kickers as well. Single goal kickers, that is. Mainly their midfield, Heaney, Gordon, Chad Warner, Grundy, all kicked 1. For GWS, Jesse Hogan kicked 3, Cadman and Angrove kicked 2 each. Players missing for Sydney, not many to be honest. Logan McDonald, Cunningham, Tom Papley, Callum Mills and Jake Lloyd. So pretty strong lineup for Sydney. For GWS, they were missing Tom Green, Stringer, Sam Taylor, Callum Brown, Caniglio and Angwin. So probably a little bit more class in their missing list with Tom Green, Sam Taylor for starters, their best midfielder and their best defender straight up, plus no Stringer. So still a strong lineup, but were probably missing slightly more depth than Sydney were. No doubt about it. That Sydney midfield looked dangerous already. Heaney had a fair bit of it, was taking screamers, kicked a goal, was running rings around him. Errol Goulden, he was everywhere. I think he had like about 30 touches or something ridiculous. He looks ready to go. It's a dangerous looking Sydney. They look fired up. Obviously they would be after what happened last year. So we'll see how that works out for them, I guess. They should be fired up and they look ready to go, this Sydney midfield. They were obviously very good last year, especially the main 3, but also Rowbottom and all the other ones that went through there as well. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. The one major position change here was Tom McCartan went forward for most of this one and didn't look spectacular. He did kick a goal late, but in the end, Amati was just getting the job done, so they didn't really need another tall forward. But they had one down there anyway. So yeah, that's about all I can take from this game. It was good from Sydney. GWS weren't outstanding. They kind of looked off the pace a bit, but you got to remember it's pre-season, not a lot to play for, and you also got to remember the fact that different teams are at different periods of their ramping up their pre-season. Every team has a slight difference in where they see the importance of these games and how they're attacking them. So don't read too much into the results other than the fact that this Sydney midfield looks dangerous again. So watch out for them, especially early season. The next one was a Friday night hit out over in South Australia. It was Adelaide, Port Adelaide. They played 4 games mainly with the AFL, and then they played four quarters, with mainly AFL team, and then they jumped across to 2 more periods with mainly SANFL players. What can we make from the 4 periods that we're going to talk about, which was the AFL ones? Adelaide looked good, 16-7, 103. Port Adelaide 11-13, 79. So pretty similar scoring shots for both teams. Adelaide obviously kicked straight and won it. They look good. There's no doubt about it. Yes, they were definitely ready to go in this one. Thilthorpe kicked 3. He'll be in their team, I think, no doubt this year. Saligo was insane. He was best on ground. He kicked 3. Walker kicked 2. He looked good. Obviously, last year was a bit of a down year for him, so we'll see if he bounces back this year. Rochelle kicked 2. Dawson, Jones, Curtin, Keys, Pedler. All really good start for their pre-season. Meanwhile, for Port Adelaide, Burn-Jones kicked 3. Rioli kicked 1. Rose, Richards, Georgiadis, Lukosius, Drew, Williams and Lord. Players missing, so Adelaide had no Rankin, Scholl, Cumming or Michelani. Meanwhile, Port Adelaide were missing Todd Marshall, Soldo, Sir Thatcher, Radagalia and Vicentini. So quite a bit of tall players, like mainly tall players missing from the Port Adelaide list, in all honesty. A couple key defenders and a couple ruckmans. So a lot of height to come back into this Port Adelaide team. There's no doubt about that. But overall, Adelaide looked outstanding. Saligo was clearly in a world of his own out there. If he takes another step, last year was outstanding from him. He played some absolute sensational games. If we see that again, from improvement again on that, watch out. He could be one of the better midfielders in the competition this year. He certainly could be right up there as their best. They've got some good players coming through. Obviously, Sid Draper was their first pick, number 4 in the draft. He's going to potentially get some midfield time. Plus, they've got all the new players into their team in Neil Bullen, Peatling, Cumming. So Adelaide looked good. There's no doubt about it. Port Adelaide looked fine. They had some troubles in front of goal. They, as I said, were missing some tools. Sam Powell-Pepper looked good in his return. Obviously did his ACL April last year. Struggled in front of goal, but he was back out there and looking good. So that's a huge positive for them. They missed him last year. There's no doubt about it. So another entertaining game, but one that Adelaide certainly will be very happy with. Port Adelaide will be fine with how the result went, I think. But overall, yeah, main take from this, Adelaide looked good. Moving on to the next one. So there was 2 games basically at the exact same time on Saturday. So yesterday at time of recording. First one we're going to look at was North v Melbourne. First half, pretty competitive game from both teams. Second half, Melbourne absolutely turned on the Jets. So final result here was North Melbourne 10-11-71. Melbourne 18 goals 9, 117. Yeah, I don't know what else to say about this game other than it was one-way traffic. So players missing for both teams here. North Melbourne didn't have Fisher, Ford, Coleman Jones, Wardlaw, Teakle or Zane Dersma. Meanwhile, Melbourne were missing quite a long list. Judd McPhee, Windsor, Viney, Falstorp, McAdam, Stephen May, who played in the All-Stars game the weekend before, so he's fine. Christian Salem, Christian Petrarca, Spargo, Max Gorn, Langdon, Milksham and Fritz. So quite a lot of talent on that Melbourne list that did not play in this one. Most of them will be coming into their next game, their actual proper official preseason game. So positive sign. A lot of young players out there, and they look good. Yeah, they did still have quite a lot of experience out there, like Lever, Clayton Oliver, Billings, a variety of other players that have played over 100 games. Cosy Pickett was out there. So don't think that Melbourne didn't have a good team, because they certainly did, but they also had quite a lot of talent sitting off in this one. Goal kickers for Melbourne, Van Rooyen kicked 4, which is good. Sharp looked really good, Jeremy Sharp. He kicked 4, so he's building for a good season this one. Pickett kicked 2, he looked good. Sparrow 2, Billings, Jefferson, Woden, Campbell, Turner and Brown all kicked 1. For the Kangaroos, it was Larkey with 3, Curtis with 2, Phillips, Daniel, Darling, Sheasel and Powell kicking 1 each. So a few new players over in North Melbourne land. Obviously they recruited some experience in the off-season. And we saw them all out there. Luke Parker was solid enough. Caleb Daniels looking really good off the half-back line. And Jack Darling will add just some experience and to add to Nick Larkey down there in the forward line. So those two could be a definite improvement on what they've had previously in that forward line. There's a second 12 in Darling, so that's going to be beneficial for them. I think all three of those players are going to be beneficial with their experience around these younger kids. They've got a bit of work to do, there's no doubt about it, the Kangaroos. As I said, this game, the match sim games, certainly don't mean much. It's just getting the cobwebs out. It's playing in sort of game conditions for the first time. But it's still not a great result to lose by 40 points to not a full-strength team. But it's a long season. I wouldn't be too concerned about it. But overall, Melbourne certainly looked the better team here. I think I heard today that so Mona's Wakefield did get carried off at one point late in the game. I believe that is bad news for them. I think I heard that he did his ACL, maybe. It might have been something completely different, but he could be out for the season, which is terrible news for Melbourne. Larkey copped a corky, but I wouldn't worry about that. He'll be fine for round 1. A few other injuries happened before the game, in training in the previous weeks, but we won't go into them. We've talked about most of those previously on the podcast. Petrarca gone, they'll be fine. They'll be playing round 1. Don't you worry about that. I would imagine they will both probably suit up for a bit of the next pre-season game on the weekend. So that's that game. That's the 8th match. It was a good one for Melbourne fans. They got to see some of their young players playing really well. For North fans, the first half looked really good. There's no doubt about it. Second half, not quite. They looked a bit off the pace of Melbourne. But it's pre-season, so we won't read too much into it. There was one final match, and it was Carlton St Kilda. Another one of the more entertaining games in this one. St Kilda ended up winning it 10-9-69 to Carlton 8-10-58. Not a high-scoring affair, which is kind of what we've become accustomed to with St Kilda. Having said that, I don't think they were not attacking. I think they just didn't attack well. So they did take some risks, certainly with their ball movement, St Kilda. And sometimes it just didn't pay off. They just kind of made errors going inside 50 once they'd moved the ball quite well up until that point. So it looked a little bit more positive and attacking than what they've shown us previously. So maybe we'll see that in their game plan this year. I hope so. But we'll wait and see. Pretty close game in the end. Players missing for Carlton were Silvani, Walsh, Newman, Charlie Curnow and Jincotta. And for St Kilda, they were missing a few more players. Max King, Rowan Marshall, Sinclair, Wood, Philippou, Henry, Clark, Howard, Zach Jones, Collard, Schoenmaker and Taru. So a bit of a long list there. A few of those are injured or just building up, so still a couple of weeks away from playing game time. Goal kickers, Carlton, Motlop kicked 3, was outstanding. Mackay kicked 2 in the opening couple minutes and then didn't do much else after that. So he looked really good in those first few minutes though. DeConning, main ruckman was good. Lucas Camporelli kicked his first. Sarah got 1. For St Kilda, O'Connell 2, Butler 2. Sharman looked really good too. His hands were clean. He's someone that could potentially break out this year. If he can get 40 plus goals this year, which I think is entirely possible, St Kilda will improve quite a lot. Boxhall, Higgins, Hall, Caminti and Travaglia all kicked 1, including that one from Travaglia. Really good. Toby kicked a ripper from beyond 50 late in the game. Kicked the last goal of the game, in fact. Biggest news from this one is obviously the Jagger Smith news. He's officially done his ACL. It was reported today at time of recording. So yesterday, if you're watching this when it's released, that he's done his ACL and Jagger Smith will be out for the season. Huge blow for Carlton. Huge blow for fantasy players. Another high draft pick that's not going to be playing. He's a ball magnet and he's going to be not used at all this year now. So terrible news for him, but he will bounce back. He'll be fine. He'll just have to wait till 2026 now. So he's out. Yeah, and that's about all the news I have in terms of injuries, because that was the obviously the bad one. So we had a couple players over the weekend go down with ACLs, which is terrible news for the clubs and for the individuals. But that's football. There was a lot of ACLs last year, look at Brisbane. So it is what it is. And yeah, that is how that game went. St Kilda looked okay. I'd like to see them convert a few more of their attacking opportunities. Carlton, after that first quarter, did not look that great, in all honesty. They had plenty of good players out there. Paddy Cripps, as I said, Harry Mackay was good early, but didn't do much after that. Wiedering looked good, but obviously, of course he does. He's one of the best fullbacks in the competition. So they've certainly had the talent out there. Just, it's pre-season though. Let's not get too hung up on the result. So that is the final match of the match sim week. That's about as exciting as it gets. Let me know what you think of all the games in the comments. What's the biggest news of the week? I think it's the fact that Jagger Smith's out for the season. Tough news for him. Lawler for Richmond is obviously a bad blow as well, but he should be back early season. He won't miss much game. So this week coming up is the official preseason games. I'll just quickly run through those matchups. So we got Geelong and Essendon on Tuesday night. On Wednesday night we got Richmond Collingwood. Thursday night we got a doubleheader, Hawthorn Bulldogs down in Launceston, and then Brisbane Adelaide up in Brisbane. Friday night also a doubleheader, GWS v Carlton and Gold Coast Sydney. Then on Saturday afternoon we got St Kilda Port Adelaide and West Coast North Melbourne. And then we finish up on Sunday with the final pre-season game, Fremantle Melbourne. Once those are done, it's the real thing. Opening round just 4 days after that. So we're getting close. We're getting very close. Yeah, that's pre-season match sims wrapped up. I I don't think I have a lot else to say other than there's going to be 2 podcasts every week. So there's one more coming out this week. It will be out on Thursday morning. First thing in the morning, I'm going to aim for all podcast episodes going live at 6 a.m. on whatever podcast app you use, whether it's Spotify, YouTube, or Apple Podcasts. Make sure you rate the podcast, like the video if it's on YouTube, comment, do all those things, share with your friends, let everyone know. If you've been watching this far in, you've obviously, hopefully enjoyed it, so let me know. On Thursday, podcast episode is all of our official 2025 season predictions. So we've done a few little prediction videos so far. Thursday podcast episode will be our official predictions for the year on what everything that we think is going to happen. So tune in for that one because it's going to be a big one. It's going to be a good one. So make sure you return for that. Other than that, I don't have much else to say. So thanks for tuning in. If you've watched this one, I hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back in a couple days. Catch you then.